Dr. Xylox's 3 hearts pulsed in synchronized agitation as he reviewed the human data file once more. The Galactic Scientific Council had never encountered a species quite like them. Their physiology was an evolutionary paradox, brittle in some ways, impossibly resilient in others. But the question at hand, the one that had perplexed even the most brilliant xenobiologists across the galaxy, was one of endurance. Humans, unlike nearly every other known species, could mate 365 days a year. Not seasonally, not cyclically, not in preordained biological windows dictated by lunar phases or hormonal surges. They could engage in reproductive activities seemingly at will, without catastrophic biological breakdown. How? Xylox flicked his clawed fingers against the control panel, his segmented eyes narrowing at the pulsating holotext. His Rigelian kin, like many species, experienced reproductive cycles only once every 15 years. Even the more frequent breeders, like the amphibious Salnari, could only sustain a month-long period of fertility before their bodies required extended recovery. Yet humans had somehow defied these limitations. Dr. Xylox, a voice crackled over the communicator, drawing him from his contemplations. It was his assistant, Vel, a wiry, blue-hued Corlaxian. The human subjects have arrived. Xylox exhaled deeply. He hadn't expected them so soon. Prepare the observation chamber. I will be there shortly. He straightened his exosuit, the reinforced fabric shifting to accommodate his lanky frame, and moved through the pristine corridors of the GSC research station. The structure orbited the neutral diplomatic zone of Yel 5, a planet known for its interspecies negotiations. Within its sterile walls, countless biological secrets had been unraveled. Today, humanity's would be next. The chamber hummed softly as he entered, a vast, dome-shaped space lined with reinforced glass and holographic interfaces. At its center stood the subjects. 3 of them. Dr. Emily Carter, a human biologist with sharp eyes and a measured stance, glanced around the chamber with careful curiosity. Next to her stood Sergeant Alex Reed, a towering figure of dense muscle, arms crossed over his chest with an expression of wary amusement. The last, Jenna Thompson, an unaffiliated civilian, observed everything with wide-eyed fascination. Xylox approached, his limbs moving in the fluid gait of his species. "Welcome, humans," he began, his translator implant smoothing out the sibilants in his natural speech. "I am Dr. Xylox, lead xenophysiologist. You are here to assist the Galactic Scientific Council in understanding a perplexing biological phenomenon regarding your species." Emily exchanged a glance with her companions before responding. "We were briefed on the study, but I have to say, the phrasing was a bit unusual." Alex chuckled under his breath. "Yeah, sustained reproductive capability across all annual cycles isn't exactly a phrase you hear every day." Jenna tilted her head. "You mean you guys don't have sex year-round?" Xylox felt a ripple of unease among the observing scientists behind the glass. For the majority of known species, reproductive activity is confined to designated biological periods. Continuous engagement without extended recovery would result in cellular degradation, hormonal collapse, and eventual systemic failure. Alex whistled lowly. "Damn. Talk about performance anxiety." Xylox ignored the remark, instead activating a holographic interface that displayed a comparative anatomical chart. Human reproductive endurance is unparalleled in the known galaxy. Your physiological resilience, your neurochemical processes, your ability to engage in such activities without mandatory recovery periods. This is an anomaly. Emily folded her arms, analytical as ever. "You're looking at it the wrong way. Humans evolved this way because of our biology, not in spite of it." "Explain," Xylox prompted. She nodded toward the chart. "You see these hormone levels? The sustained presence of testosterone and estrogen in humans doesn't fluctuate to the extreme degrees seen in most species. Our bodies are designed for constant adaptability. Our muscle recovery rate, cardiovascular efficiency, and neural plasticity all contribute to endurance. It's not just about reproduction. It's about survival." Jenna grinned. "So basically, we're built to last." Xylox processed this information carefully. The idea of a species engineered by evolution to sustain high levels of activity indefinitely was disturbing. Efficient, but disturbing. Behind him, Vel muttered something in Korlaxian, sounding vaguely horrified. I do not fully understand, Xylox admitted, flicking through more data. If your endurance is so advanced, how does your species prevent overexertion? Alex smirked. You're assuming we always have self-control. Emily shot him a look but didn't argue. In practical terms, we regulate ourselves socially, emotionally. Human bonding plays a role. Psychological satisfaction impacts physiological limits. Xylox considered this. It was true that many species experience social bonding, but none seemed to have it so intricately tied to their physical endurance. You are suggesting that neural stimulus influences your biological recovery? More than that, Jenna chimed in. It accelerates it. Positive reinforcement, dopamine release, it all feeds into our ability to keep going. There was a long silence. Then Vel murmured, They heal themselves through pleasure? The words sent a ripple of disbelief through the observation deck. Several scientists exchanged concerned glances. Xylox, for all his scientific rigor, felt his exoskeleton tighten. A species that could sustain peak biological function through continued activity, with no mandatory rest periods, no enforced recovery cycles. Unnatural. He straightened, recalibrating. We will need to conduct controlled tests to confirm these findings. Alex raised an eyebrow. Controlled tests. Xylox gestured toward the adjacent analysis rooms. Monitored endurance trials, neural activity scans, cardiovascular stress testing. Jenna raised an eyebrow. You do realize we're not lab rats, right? Emily sighed. We expected some level of physiological observation. But if you think we're just going to perform on command for data, you've got another thing coming. Xylox blinked. That was not the intended methodology. Alex chuckled. Sure sounded like it. The tension in the room shifted. The humans were amused, but Xylox could sense their underlying caution. This was expected. They were, after all, dealing with an alien scientific body. Trust would not come easily. He exhaled. A slow, deliberate gesture. The goal is knowledge, not exploitation. Emily studied him for a moment before nodding. Fine, but we set some boundaries. No invasive procedures without consent. No performance demonstrations under duress. And if we find anything in your tests that suggests humans aren't some kind of freak endurance species. Xylox inclined his head. Then the council will accept the findings. Alex cracked his knuckles. All right then, document. Let's see if your science can keep up with us. The research had begun. The first round of tests had been relatively simple physiological scans, neural imaging, and basic endurance trials. But as the research progressed, it became abundantly clear that the human anomaly was not a statistical outlier or a misunderstood biological quirk. It was a reality. Dr. Xylox stood in the primary observation chamber, his fingers twitching over the control panel as streams of data scrolled across the interface. Heart rates, hormone levels, muscle fiber regeneration speeds, all of it pointed to the same impossible conclusion. The human body was designed to endure, not in the way some predatory species adapted to short bursts of extreme exertion, nor in the way that hive-based organisms compensated through sheer numbers. No, humans endured through a combination of factors, biological, neurological, and, most curiously, psychological. The 3 human test subjects sat on the other side of the reinforced glass, their expressions ranging from mild amusement to open boredom. Sergeant Alex Reed stretched his arms, cracking his knuckles as if he had just finished a light warm-up rather than an intense metabolic assessment. Dr. Emily Carter examined the data on a secondary monitor, occasionally making comments the alien researchers struggled to process. Jenna Thompson, the civilian, merely leaned back in her chair, observing the room with an air of bemused detachment. You're telling me, Vel muttered from Xylox's side, that after an extended exertion test well beyond what would incapacitate most species, they requested food? Xylox barely nodded. And not just food. Sergeant Reed requested a protein shake, and inquired whether he would be allowed to run another round of physical evaluations. Vel made a noise somewhere between a whistle and a horrified chirp. "Unnatural. You said that before?" Xylox replied, shifting his gaze back to the humans. "And yet the data does not lie." The doors to the chamber hissed open, and Xylox stepped inside, followed closely by Vel. The humans turned to face them, Alex grinning as if expecting some kind of award. "So, Doc," he said, folding his arms, "what's the verdict? Are we officially the weirdest thing in the galaxy yet?" Xylox regarded him carefully. "Your species has demonstrated physiological endurance far beyond any comparative baselines. Your cardiovascular systems operate with a redundancy factor that suggests evolutionary selection for prolonged activity, and your musculoskeletal structure exhibits accelerated recovery speeds in response to strain. But the most concerning factor is your ability to override biological exhaustion through sheer neural stimulus." Emily smirked. "We call that willpower." Jenna nodded. "Or stubbornness. Take your pick." Xylox narrowed his eyes. "You misunderstand. Most species experience an involuntary neurological shutdown when critical biological thresholds are met. You do not. Even when your bodies show signs of distress, you continue functioning through cognitive override. This is highly irregular." "Not to us," Alex said. "We train for it. Hell, some of us even enjoy it." Vel twitched. "Enjoy?" Alex shrugged. "You know, pushing past limits. Seeing how far we can go." Xylox turned toward Emily. "Your scientific training, have you ever encountered a species that exhibits this level of controlled self-exertion?" Emily considered the question. "There are species with high stamina, sure. But human endurance isn't just about the physical. It's mental, emotional, our ability to keep going, to push past barriers. It's part of how we survived on Earth." Vel's eyes darkened. "Your planet tried to kill you, and this was your response?" Jenna chuckled. "Pretty much. Earth wasn't exactly kind to early humans. We adapted." Xylox tapped his claws against the console, deep in thought. "There are species that rely on regenerative abilities, on shared hive intelligence, on enhanced musculature to compensate for physical limits. But none rely on sheer determination as a biological function. This is unprecedented." Vel turned toward Alex with something bordering on horror. "You choose to suffer?" Alex grinned. "Only when it's fun." Xylox straightened. "We will need to run more advanced trials. Specifically, controlled endurance examinations under varied conditions. We must determine if this resilience has limits." Emily narrowed her eyes. "And what exactly does that mean?" Xylox pressed a sequence on his console, and a new series of diagrams materialized on the holographic display. "We have simulated environmental conditions meant to stress biological systems. Varying temperatures, oxygen levels, metabolic demands. We will observe your responses to sustained exertion under controlled strain." Alex rolled his shoulders. "So what, extreme weather training?" "Been there. Done that." Vel twitched again. "You have trained for such conditions?" Jenna smirked. "Didn't you read up on us? We run marathons across deserts, climb mountains in sub-zero temperatures. Some of us even dive into freezing water just for fun." Vel looked at Xylox as if questioning the fundamental nature of reality. "This species is insane." Xylox did not disagree, but scientific rigor demanded confirmation. The trials began the next day. The humans were separated into isolated environmental chambers, each designed to simulate extreme conditions. Alex was placed in a low-oxygen environment, one that mimicked the thin atmosphere of high-altitude planets. Emily was subjected to extreme heat, a controlled but punishing simulation of desert conditions. Jenna was exposed to extreme cold, her chamber dropping to near cryogenic temperatures. For most species, even brief exposure to these conditions would trigger immediate biological distress. For the humans, it merely became another challenge. Alex adapted quickly to the low-oxygen environment, adjusting his breathing rhythm with an ease that unsettled the observers. Instead of panicking, his body acclimated. His heart rate adjusted, his oxygen intake efficiency increased, and he carried on as if the stress was negligible. Emily, placed under scorching heat, exhibited high sweat efficiency, her body's cooling mechanisms keeping her core temperature stable long beyond predicted thresholds. Instead of slowing down, she paced herself, conserving energy in a way that suggested deep-rooted evolutionary adaptation. Jenna, in sub-zero temperatures, initially reacted as expected, shivering, her metabolism spiking to compensate for heat loss. But as time passed, her body adjusted. The trembling ceased, and her extremities maintained function despite prolonged exposure. Xylox observed, deeply unsettled. After hours of testing, the results were undeniable. Humans didn't just endure, they adapted, rapidly, efficiently. It was as if their biology refused to accept its own limits. The doors to the testing chambers opened, and the three humans emerged, their expressions ranging from mildly tired to downright smug. Alex cracked his neck. "That all you got?" Vel made a small, strangled sound. Emily wiped a sheen of sweat from her brow. "We done proving we're freaks of nature yet?" Jenna rubbed her arms to warm herself up. "Or do we need to set ourselves on fire next?" Xylox exhaled slowly. He had expected resilience, but this bordered on unnatural. The council would have to reconsider everything they knew about biological endurance. And more than that, they would have to decide what it meant. Xylox stared at the latest data streams, his segmented eyes flickering between disbelief and dawning comprehension. The humans had passed every test, not just survived them, but thrived under conditions that should have driven any other species to collapse. Their endurance was not merely a quirk of biology. It was a defiance of fundamental biological constraints. They didn't just persist, they adapted at speeds that made no evolutionary sense. Vel sat rigidly beside him, his blue skin paler than before. "Doctor, I have reviewed the figures twice, and I still do not believe them." Xylox remained silent. He understood the skepticism. He himself had spent the last 3 research cycles struggling to accept what the evidence demanded. The humans weren't just an anomaly, they were a contradiction. A sharp chime announced the arrival of the subjects. The reinforced doors slid open, and Emily Carter, Alex Reed, and Jenna Thompson strode inside, looking infuriatingly unfazed. "So," Alex said, dropping into one of the debriefing chairs with an easy grin, "we pass." Xylox took a slow breath, trying to formulate a response that encapsulated the magnitude of their findings. "You have exceeded every known physiological and neurological endurance threshold. The Council will need to reconsider multiple biological models." Emily leaned forward, curiosity sharp in her eyes. "Meaning?" Vel exhaled, rubbing his temples as if the mere thought pained him. "Meaning we have no idea how your species exists." Jenna tilted her head. "You make it sound like we're breaking some kind of law." "You are," Xylox admitted. "A biological law. Every species has limits, thresholds. You do not seem to have them. This is not a natural trait." Emily frowned. "It is natural. We just evolved differently." Xylox shook his head. "No. Evolution refines survival traits, but it follows patterns. You are an aberration. Not because of your stamina, not because of your metabolic efficiency, but because your neural architecture overrides biological constraints. That is not normal." Alex leaned back, thoughtful. "So what are you saying? That we shouldn't exist?" Vel hesitated before answering. "We are saying that if your species was discovered in isolation, without knowledge of your history, the scientific consensus would declare you an engineered race." Silence settled over the chamber. Jenna blinked. "Wait, engineered? Like, artificially made?" Xylox hesitated before nodding. "Yes, if another species had presented your biological profile, we would assume an advanced civilization had designed you." Emily's expression darkened. "But that's not what happened." "Correct," Xylox said, "which makes your existence even more improbable." Alex rubbed his jaw. "So let me get this straight. You've studied thousands of species, and none of them have anything close to what we have." Vel made a frustrated gesture. "Some have partial similarities, high stamina, rapid healing, controlled exertion, but none have all of them. And none override exhaustion through sheer mental force. Emily's mind worked through the implications. You think our ability to push through pain, to keep going despite exhaustion, isn't just a trait, it's a flaw in the system. Jenna let out a low whistle. Damn, we're the glitch in the universe. Huh. Xylox wasn't sure how to answer. He could see the pride in their expressions, the amusement. They saw their endurance as a strength. And perhaps it was. But it also meant something else. It meant that the universe had never intended for them to exist this way. And yet, here they were. Vel broke the silence first. The council will want to discuss this. There may be political implications. Alex raised an eyebrow. Political? Why? Xylox hesitated before answering. If endurance is your greatest biological advantage, it makes you valuable in ways that other species are not. Emily's eyes narrowed. Valuable how? There are species that could benefit from such traits, that might seek to harness them. A weight settled over the room. The implications were clear. If human biology defied limitations, then certain factions, military, corporate, scientific, would inevitably attempt to exploit it. Jenna exhaled. You're saying some people are going to see us as resources? Xylox nodded. Your endurance is not just remarkable. It is dangerous. If the wrong entities decide to study your capabilities, they may attempt to replicate or manipulate them. Alex's smile faded. That sounds a hell of a lot like someone trying to put us in cages. Vel looked deeply uncomfortable. The council will not allow such actions. Emily's expression remained unreadable. And what about those outside the council? Silence. Xylox had no answer. Jenna tapped her fingers against the table. So what do we do? Xylox folded his hands. The safest course of action would be to control how much information is released. To present your species as remarkable but not too remarkable. Alex's eyes darkened. You're saying we lie. Not lie, Xylox corrected, but withhold. Emily shook her head. That's not going to work forever. Someone's going to dig deeper. Vel hesitated before speaking. Then perhaps it is best if you prepare. Alex snorted. Prepare for what? The rest of the galaxy deciding we're some kind of super soldiers. No one answered. The room remained still, tension coiling in the air. Eventually, Emily broke the silence. We should leave. We've given you enough data. Anything more, and we start painting a target on our backs. Xylox knew she was right. He stood. Then this research ends here. Vel looked at him sharply, but Xylox did not waver. He understood the cost of knowledge. Some things were not meant to be shared. Alex exhaled. Well, this was fun. Jenna smirked. Speak for yourself. Emily nodded at Xylox. Thank you for your honesty. Xylox inclined his head. And you for yours. As the humans exited, Xylox felt an unfamiliar sensation settle in his chest. A quiet, unsettling certainty. The galaxy had no idea what it was dealing with.